And we had another question from Woopla. In your experience, what are common problems that esports athletes tend to have?
Oh God.
Big
so
topic.
so on stream, I work a fair amount with esports athletes, and there are a ton of them, to be sure. I think the one that I've been thinking about the most recently is actually. So I think a lot of one huge problem is that esports doesn't have a physical limitation. So what happens is, like, if you look at like a professional athlete, like let's say like an NFL player, or like a baseball player or soccer player or something, you can't practice football for like more than 6 hours a day. So I've also worked with like NFL athletes and things like that, and their training regimen is like somewhere between 4 and 8 hours a day because there's just physical limitations of the human body. With esports athletes, there isn't that limitation. So another thing is I think that 18-year-olds are just not like cognitively prepared for this degree of stress. So a lot of times, so that's another big thing that they face is that, you think about it, like you're in high school, right? And you're streaming a lot or you're playing a lot of Overwatch and like that's working great, but then suddenly you're in this so one of the things that happens is when you're streaming and before you get a pro contract, you're like one of the best, right? So you're kind of the best of the best. And that's what gets you the pro contract. And then once you enter the actual league, then suddenly you're average or even below average. And so a lot of these, it's a huge psychological blow to be someone who is the best and then suddenly be lumped into people who are in like the average or below average. And that psychological blow is really hard to get over. The funny thing is I had a buddy who went to Harvard Law School, and I asked him after his first year, like, how's law school going? And he said, it's actually kind of sucks. I asked him, like, well, why does it suck? And he says, one of the cruelest things you can do is to take a bunch of people who think that they're exceptional and make them average. And when you do that to people, they become nasty. And so I think esports, it's hard to be, it's cool. Like you think about like, oh, being an esports athlete, like it's awesome. And in a lot of ways it is, but it's really hard psychologically. The other thing that happens is that there's a lot of stress around job security because no one really knows. Like, so do people know about you?
No.
Okay. So Kangaroo
I had the option to go pro after college in League of Legends, and at the same time, I also had an offer for medical school. So I turned down the contract to go pro and went to medical school instead.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are concerned about job security, right? So this is especially true for the pro players that I work with that are a little bit older. Like once you hit 22, 23, like after you, like if you get kicked from your team, then like what do you do? Like, can you find a job? Like, how does that work? Mm-hmm. So it's an emerging field. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of uncertainty about job security, which can be pretty stressful.
What about self-imposed burnout? Whoop was asking. It seems that a lot of times it's not just the teams that set the schedule, but the players themselves seem to burn themselves out.
Yeah, so that was actually a great question because I was about to segue into that. I think this is also something that I see with streamers, right? So yes, this is not necessarily pro players, but the other thing that's happening is like people push themselves, and if you become a streamer, there are all kinds of like psychological weights that get put on you. Because when you become a streamer, or even if you become like a pro esports athlete, you kind of start to become someone that you're not. And being someone that you normally aren't, because before you go pro, you really loved to play the game, and that's the reason that you were playing the game. But let's say a year after you go pro, you're playing Overwatch. Now you've been playing Overwatch for like 2.5 years, and maybe you want to stop playing Overwatch. Because if you think about most gamers, like what do you guys do when you want to stop playing a game? You stop playing a game. But in this case, you kind of can't. You're trapped. You're stuck. And when I work with streamers, like that's also a big problem, is that they have invested so much in building their stream that they feel like they have to be this personality. And they can't actually be themselves, because if you start changing the content of your stream, your viewers may leave.
Yeah.
And you start to build up an identity that you feel like you have to maintain. And that identity becomes like a house of cards. And then people just burn out. They just can't handle it anymore.